Hello, my name is Matthew and welcome to my YouTube video. This is the first one of what I hope to be a series of YouTube videos. Essentially, what I'm trying to do with this series is keep a record of my writing process and my reading and my inspirations as I go through my writing process. As It will be mainly for me as a way to kind of track my progress, to uh, encourage me to keep writing. But I also hope that it is going to be something that my viewers will find interesting or eye-opening, or just give them some insight into how someone else writes and works on their fiction and gets inspired by books. So hopefully it'll be entertaining. Who knows? Maybe it won't be. Try my best. Okay. This first video today is on a glorious February 27th, Thursday, 2014. It is freezing cold outside. I was going to swear, but I'm going to try not to swear on these videos. It is freezing cold out there. It is still not the end of winter. Please, will it end at some point? That being said, I thought I'd mention first how my writing is going. So just to give you an idea, I've started writing a new novel. I have a previous novel that I'm trying to get published right now, but I've also decided to start working on my new novel. And my new novel is still fairly, well, it's still fairly new. I started writing it about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And before that I wrote several pages of notes, and those have been very helpful. But right now I've actually started typing out and writing the actual text of my novel, and so far it's at about 6,000 words, which I'm very happy about. Um, I'm not getting to I'm not writing every morning, which is what I'd like to be doing, but I'm generally getting to about 3 mornings a week that I can write, and I think that's great. Well, it's great for me, and it's been very enjoyable so far. Um, I haven't really hit any roadblocks yet, which I know they're going to be in the future. Knock on wood. But right now, it's been very enjoyable. I'm kind of in a flow. I kind of feel very inspired by what I'm doing. So I know this is going to end at some point, and eventually it's going to become quite stressful or just quite frustrating, and I'm going to try to keep this going as long as possible. So yes, my writing's doing quite well. Um, I mean, at the same time, as I'm writing, I know that the quality of my writing isn't very strong right now, and or at least I feel like it's not as good as it could be, which is often a problem with first drafts, obviously. One of the things that I'm going to talk about later is that I'm reading Flaubert, and reading Flaubert at the same time as writing a first draft is probably not one of the best things to do, because Flaubert is excellent at writing incredibly beautiful and well-described sentences, and I'm having trouble stringing together 2 or 3. In fact, my big problem right now is that I find that I'm using descriptions from my last book, and I don't think it's very good to keep recycling your own material. So that's something I'm going to have to work on as I go through. Um, but yes, I've also been reading as well. And there's 2 books that I've been reading. I just finished this. Well, I finished it about a week ago. And it's Tina Fey's Bossy Pants. And every other human being on the planet read it like 3 years ago, but I just read it right now. And I found it really good. It was lots of fun. She's super funny. She's like an incredibly funny writer. And as someone who really wants to become a better comedy writer, I'm probably going to try to steal things from it later on, but not right now. That's not my focus. But one of the things that I really liked about it was that she gave a lot of super practical life advice, and I love practical life advice. I probably should be reading self-help books because I love practical things. And but one of her best nuggets of wisdom was that you when you are a creative person and you're trying to produce something, you have to just keep producing things, and you have to not worry about producing bad things, like crappy things, because often we get into this mindset that if we produce bad things, it's going to ruin our reputation. And her point is that people tend to forget your bad things that you do and they remember the good things. So the important thing is to get through those bad things and get to the good things. And she gives the example of when she worked in SNL, there were many, many times when they knew they were putting stinkers on the air, and they still went and did it because they had to do it. It was better to have a stinker on the air than to have dead air, and and that's, I guess, the thing that you can take away from this is that it's better to have produced terrible writing than it is to have produced no writing at all. Okay, so that being said, Bossy Pants, Tina Fey. I really like it. And it's not just one of those books that I read quickly and then decide I'll never look at again. I actually am going to look at it again. But I am also reading Madame Bovary. This is a book I've read. This is probably the fourth or fifth time I've read it. Don't really know how many times I've read it. This is the Lydia Davis translation that came out a couple of years ago. And the translation is good. I can't really tell that Lydia Davis herself did it. Doesn't read like her short stories, which is probably a good thing because her style is very different than Flaubert's. But it's a beautiful translation. I don't have the original French, so I can't compare. I don't really see much of a difference between this and the last translation I read, which was the Francis Steegmuller translation. But it's brilliant. It's good. It's like there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. There was one part actually where the translation of one of my favorite scenes seemed a little strange or off, and now I'm wondering if what I thought was such a beautiful scene was actually just someone else's translation. So I'll have to find that out one day. Try to translate it myself. But the key thing that I really wanted to talk about here is, well, first of all, I've read it several times. So oftentimes when I read a book for a couple of times, I find that each time, particularly good books, each time I read it, I find something interesting or new about it. And this time I'm not necessarily seeing all the interesting and new things. And that's a little bit disappointing, but I think it's because I read Madame Bovary fairly recently, like probably only like 2 or 3 years ago. So this translation is, or sorry, this book's still a little fresh in my mind. And what that means is that I just read much of it. A good book, when you come back to it, you often remember, or you often read parts that you totally forgotten about, and now I kind of remember everything. But it'll probably get better as I go through, and there'll be parts that I don't remember. Uh, and the other thing was, it's been great going through it, and there's lots of little details that I can use in my own writing. Just looking at the way, for example, Lydia Davis, I assume she's translating it correctly, the way Flaubert uses grammar and punctuation in some interesting ways. And for instance, like he uses comma splices often, and this can, as a teacher, I'm always telling people not to use comma splices, but it's interesting how he uses them because he often uses it as if the two parts of the comma splice are two things in a list where the third thing is missing. And so that creates an interesting thing because it creates this feeling that there should be a third thing rather than these two things are just squished together accidentally. So there's things like that where there's like really interesting uses of grammar. And then, as I said earlier, I'm finding it difficult to describe things properly or get new descriptions. I'm kind of using the same descriptions I used in my last book. And so I'm looking at his use of description. And it's very interesting because he uses description in, he can often be a little too descriptive. I mean, this is something that a lot of 19th century writers do, is that they write long passages where everything is described. And what I actually find myself when I'm reading these passages is that sometimes I can't visualize what is actually in the scene because it's described too well. And it's making me think again. This is something that I think about a lot in terms of writing, is that you often have to balance between being very precise and being a little vague. And you have to be a little, like, you can't be vague in just bland and boring ways, or ways where you're being carelessly vague, but you have to be artful in the way that you are vague. And like the example that I have here is um, he says, um, she noticed his fingernails, which were longer than was customary in Yonville. It was one of the clerk's great occupations to care for them, and he kept, for that purpose, a special penknife in his writing desk. And what's interesting about that is special. You know, special is a pretty vague word, and it doesn't actually say anything about the type of penknife that he's using. But penknife is very descriptive, and writing desk is pretty specific. So it's, that word special is vague, but it's being used in an important way. It's giving the reader room to imagine the scene themselves. What type of special penknife is it? It doesn't really matter. It matters that it was something that he imagined as being special. And he's the type of person who would have a special penknife. You know, there's a lot of things that are connected with this very vague word that can actually be quite descriptive. Whereas something like he says, this is about a river. It flowed noiselessly, swift and cold to the eye, tall, blah, blah, blah. And when I first read that, I actually found it difficult to think about what noiselessly meant, because it's an adverb, noiselessly. It's like you go, okay, it's making noise. No, wait, it's not. And it's not actually, it's the flow that's not making noise. So it's a little difficult to figure that out. Whereas the words swift and cold, you instantly kind of get, like, they kind of touch you. And it's because they're short, very impactful verbs. Or no, one's a verb and one's an adjective, and they're both kind of being used as, so they're both adjectives. Terrible here. But they're both very descriptive, very short, impactful adjectives. And that was something else that I was thinking about, that, like, sometimes your precision can be so precise that it actually takes a bit of time for someone to unpack the sentence, which can be nice in the feeling of, oh, I really want to reread this book and blah, blah, blah. But when you're reading a book, it should be, at least this is how I feel, it should be easy to read and easy to understand upon your first read. So there's lots of things in here that I could go on about, but I'm going to cut it off here. And I just want to say, yeah, so I'm going to try to do a YouTube video every week, and I'm going to try to keep you updated in terms of my writing, how it's going, how I feel about it, and the books that I'm reading. I'm probably going to still be reading Madame Bovary. I think it's going to take me a while to read because right now I'm reading pretty slowly. And otherwise, if you do want to ask me questions, or you want to recommend something or suggest something to me, my email will be in the about for this video. Otherwise, I will see you in a week, and I hope you have a good weekend. Bye-bye.